just putting together a couple of comments. What was interesting about the question, though, is that, and I found your comment earlier that if you want to know what the manufacturer's thinking about doing, ask them what their branding strategy is. It seems to me, though, that their channel strategy may vary from country to country or region to region, state to state, whatever it may be. But most of them will admit that they want a global branding strategy. Yeah. So that could create kind of a conflict.
It's kind of an early indicator where they're going, I'm telling you, even on channels, because they're going to have a hard time with a common brand not more or less having a common channel, because that causes mass confusion unless the sub-brand, like the product line brand, is as strong as the corporate brand. Okay, you understand what I'm saying, right? So you can play around with branding strategy, but understanding where they're going with the brand, because the brand ends up, in the classic marketing sense, the brand is the company, right? It's not just the label, it's the culture of the company. So it's a really strong indicator where they're going strategically, if they're doing it right.
Questions, comments? Before we wrap this up, I'll go back to these guys one more time before we go, but I'd be interested in your views wearing distributor hats. If I'm a mid-level manufacturing guy, let's say I'm a regional manager and I've got some district managers reporting to me, and all of a sudden I find out my company's been acquired by somebody else, and it's an extension, right? And I was one of the guys on the outside. So I hear about it at the same time the distributors hear about it with the phone calls at lunchtime. Mm-hmm. What should I be doing in the 30 days? I mean, other than updating my resume and going to monster.com. But I mean, white hat, trying to be a good guy. What's the right thing for me to be doing?
I think the same thing the distributors are doing.
Close to the money.
I think the same thing the distributors doing. How relevant am I to the corporation? Am I meeting my numbers? Am I a superstar within the company? And if so, I'm going to feel pretty comfortable. Okay. I'm going to measure the field. At the same time, I don't know that I would jump out and put a resume on the street, because that probably isn't going to help your cause. Yeah. Especially today, because everybody knows what's going on today.
And volunteer to be on the integration team, Mike.
There you go.
That's step one for sure.
Yeah, if I'm not on the integration team, that tells me something, doesn't it? Yeah.
Well put.
Okay, fair call. Another chance for questions? Everybody's going to be really quiet. And my guess is there'll probably be an interesting conversation. The interesting part of this conversation will be the 10 minutes after we wrap this meeting. But
it's always that way with a challenging topic.
Yes, it is. One of the things that I'd like to explore a little bit is when things start to go bad. Let's say, for the sake of discussion, somebody buys somebody, changes the competitive nature of the industry, right? Because you can't just move one marble. At your point, there's always counter moves and everything else. But when a manufacturer, whether they're just a competitor or whether they're the one that's actually doing the acquisition, when things start to go bad, what are the early signs that it starts to go bad that maybe a senior executive should really listen to and maybe just stop and go, we got to do something different? I mean, a lot of times I see these things, they just get worse and worse and worse, and nobody knows how to stop. Are there any kind of signs people should be looking for if I'm on the manufacturer side?
Well, I think one of the things, there's basically two basic scenarios to make an acquisition, right? Are you going to integrate or are you going to keep them independent? I mean,
that's a key choice.
How far on that continuum, where in that continuum are you going to go? A lot of times you buy a company, right? You're worried initially about just keeping the revenue stream coming in. So everybody says, we got to protect the brand, we got to protect the channel, we don't want a disturbance, and we'll worry about the sales synergies later. We don't build a lot of those in. Well, watch the performance of that business that got acquired. And if the performance, isn't meeting expectations, all of a sudden there's a common reaction, which is, must be time to integrate, and it is done more in sort of a panic, than it was because it was upfront plan. But the problem is, if you make an acquisition and you leave it alone for 2 years, everybody, when people get acquired, you've all dealt with this as well, the manufacturers, if you do nothing for a while, everybody assumes that nothing is going to change in the future. And then later on, when you do want to change, everybody's like, wait a minute, I thought it wasn't going to change. When people are acquired, they expect change relatively early. So if you got to make change, that's why so listen for a while, but when you do, go, right? But the ones that are really usually the worst are the ones that don't perform, then they do the integration after the fact. Some of the good people have left. Those are just sort of the, up in the air. So
It's almost, you just described the worst practice.
yeah, oh yeah. I mean, so the old, nothing's going to change, and except we're going to. You can do manufacturing consolidation, business system consolidation. Those are the things you control. Those don't really impact as long as you do them well. Your customer-facing side. Okay.
It doing well. They combine back in IT systems.
But if it's done poorly, it will have a reflection on the customer side for sure, right? But I said earlier, when you mess with channels, when you mess with sales, you're messing with the revenue stream. And so you got to keep track of whether or not the revenue stream is meeting expectations, because they're going to do something different if it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, the best practice is if you're going to integrate, you integrate quickly.
Yeah.
And you look at any company that's good at doing acquisitions, they'll find they have a flawless execution system, okay? And they get in there quickly, they integrate it, and they move on. And they make the tough decisions early. I think the decisions get tougher as you go on, not easier. And if people think it's just going to go away and happen, it's not going to do it. And then just look at the talk that continues to go on within the industry. Well, why did they do it? Why aren't they doing something with it? What are they going to do? When's the other shoe going to fall? That's the problem.
Yes, sir.
I think, to your question, one thing manufacturers can do is look very closely at the performance of their outsourced sales forces. Many manufacturers use the outsourced sales method for selling. And once the relationship between the local distributor, the local rep, and the local customer begins to break down, I think that manufacturer has a good sense of where the whole thing is going and needs to take some sort of remedial action. I think, speaking as a former manufacturer and having been in this industry my whole life, I can see where, from the independent rep standpoint, who's managing a portfolio of lines and is really trying to look at their income. What I can see quite frequently is how fast the commercial value gets destroyed in an integration process. The value that made that company attractive to begin with, as an attractive candidate, seemingly without the proper execution, it's going very quickly. And I think one thing manufacturers can really look at is the behavior of their reps.
I'm not going to. We're almost out of time, so you won't get my Dennis Miller rant on this, but I've got one. Rep firms are channel partners, and a lot of manufacturers look at them as just sort of variable cost hired rep or hired help, and so they don't listen to what they're saying. But a channel is defined as an interdependent group of companies that are involved in how a product is used or consumed. And a rep firm is much more like a distributor than it is like just a freelance sales rep. And I see manufacturers all the time go through and do this, and they create all kinds of problems because they just don't take the time to look. Rep firms are a wonderful source of channel innovation because a good rep irritates distributors and their manufacturer principals equally. Right? Keeps them both honest. Sorry, I just got excited.
But integrating companies that have rep firms adds a whole nother dimension of complexity, right? Because if you're integrating two companies that both have direct sales forces, effectively, you're not questioning what are the other lines.
Well, they can refuse to endorse the paycheck and quit.
Now you're at another exponent to the complexity, because now you've got to align the rep lines, and the distributor lines, and that rationalization, again, is another emotional piece that, and can be very subjective, separate from the distributor rationalization. So.
Last chance for questions before I get my panelists to put a wrap on this. Or 90 minutes gone by pretty fast, hadn't it? And I'd mentioned this to the panel before. If you're thinking about manufacturer consolidation, here's the question I posed to my panelists. If you think about manufacturer consolidation and the impact on the distributor, and you go back to my Jack Palance, Billy Crystal City Slickers, what's the one thing? What's the one thing that this group should be thinking about? You know, if you're going to give them a message as they're thinking through this process, to keep in the forefront of their minds, they think about it. What would be that one thing?
And I'll start on that. I think, first of all, you want to stay close to your manufacturers and understand their long-term strategy. And that strategy may not just be, who am I going to buy, but what am I going to sell off? Because they're going to sell as well as they're going to buy. And I think if you understand the long-term strategy and you're part of that strategy, you become a strategic partner, and they can help lead you where they are going. And I think that's very important, to have that key supplier or a couple key suppliers that are going to make you the partner that they're going to pull along.
Billy, how about you?
Well, I guess I come back to the old cliche. I mean, every time there's change, there's opportunity. I mean, and I think you have to keep an open mind and look at this as an opportunity. You know, Bob brings up a good point. I mean, I think you have to have a lot of honest communication with the vendor and find out where they're headed, what their goals are, and try to match them with your goals. And but every time there's change, there's opportunities. So.
Yeah, and Bob started out the whole conversation with communication and making sure the communication is from sources that are going to be credible, particularly early on in the process. There's going to be lots of agendas, so sorting through that. And again, being honest about your own position, your own, as I always say, are you attractive because of how you perform, not because of something you knew, because that person may change. So when somebody does an objective evaluation, you still look the same.
Yep. This has been a difficult subject if you think about how nervous some of you were to ask your questions. But please join me in thanking our panelists for being brave enough to come.